Far north, somewhere near the icy regions of the North Pole, legend speaks of an ancient and mostly forgotten civilization. Mythical in character, the Hyperborean civilization is said to have flourished in the northernmost region of planet Earth at a time when the area was suitable for human habitation. According to certain esoteric systems and spiritual traditions, Hyperborea was a terrestrial and celestial beginning of civilization, the home of original man. Some theories postulate Hyperborea was the original Garden of Eden, the point where the earthly and heavenly planes meet. And it is said man transgressed divine law in this golden age civilization, the ultimate prize being his banishment to the outside world. Man ventured into other regions of earth, establishing new civilizations, bringing to an end this great and glorious golden age. The golden age is central to manifold ancient traditions and myths. Significantly, the golden age appears most frequent in the traditions of cultures stretching from India to northern Europe, the area directly beneath the polar regions. Jocelyn Godwin in Arctos, The Polar Myth in Science, Symbolism and Nazi Survival says, the memory or imagination of a golden age seems to be a particularity of the cultures that covered the area from India to northern Europe. But in the ancient Middle East, there is an obvious relic of the golden age in Genesis as the Garden of Eden, where humanity walked with the gods before the fall. The Egyptians spoke of past epochs ruled by god kings. Babylonian mythology had a scheme of 3 ages, each lasting while the vernal equinox processed through the signs of the zodiac. The first of these, under the dominion of Anu, a golden age ended by the flood. The Iranian Avesta texts tell the 1000-year golden reign of Yima, the first man and the first king, under whose rule cold and heat, old age, death and sickness were unknown. The most fully developed theory of this kind, and probably the oldest one, is the Hindu doctrine of the 4 yugas. The 4 ages in the system are the Krita or Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dvapara Yuga and Kali Yuga, the whole tenfold period making up one Maya Yuga. The Krita Yuga corresponds to the Golden Age, the Kali Yuga to the current period of time. Every description of the Golden Age period relates how the gods walked with men in a perfect and harmonious environmental balance between the terrestrial and celestial. Humanity suffered no sickness and no aging in the timeless paradise. After the fall, man fell into the time suffering, forfeiting the gift of immortality.
With so many conspiracy theories out there, it's hard to keep track of them all. Welcome to What We Know, where we try to uncover the histories and mysteries of the world by presenting all different theories out there, and the only narrative we push is this. Here's what we know, make up your own mind.
Madame Blavatsky, the founder of Theosophical Society, claimed the second root race originated in Hyperborea, before the later races of Lemuria and Atlantis. The Russian metaphysician Alexandra Dugin says that it was the home of solar people connected to what is now northern Russia. Solar people, Alexandra Dugin explained, are cultural spiritual type who are creative, energetic and spiritual. They are the opposite of the lunar people, a psycho-spiritual type of the materialistic, conservative and weary of change. The ancient Greeks have a legend of Hyperborea, a land of perpetual sun beyond the north winds. Hecachius says that the holy place of the Hyperboreans, which was built after the pattern of the spheres, lay in the regions beyond the land of the Celts, on the island in the ocean. According to popular accounts, the god Apollo temple at Delphi was founded by individuals from Hyperborea. The Greek lyric poet Alashius sang the actual or mystical journey of Apollo to the land of the Hyperboreans. King Apollo, son of great Zeus, whom thy father did furnish forth at the birth with golden headband and lyre of shell, and giving 3 moreover a swan-drawn chariot to drive, would have thee go to Delphia, but nevertheless once mounted, thou badest thy swans fly to the land of the Hyperboreans. The wearing of star-embroidered robe by the king or the ruler of the world, the heavenly spheres serving as a symbol of the earthly one, is a custom that can be traced to the Hyperboreans. Embroidered in gold on silk blue, where the figures of the sun, moon and stars, such robes were worn by the kings of the ancient Rome and Julius Caesar, as well as Augustus and the Roman emperors. Earthenware statuettes found in a grave in Yugoslavia show the Hyperborean Apollo in a chariot drawn by swans. The god wears on his neck a breast, yellow figures of the sun and stars on his head is a red crown with a headband that has a zigzag pattern. His robe, which reaches to the ground, is dark blue with yellow designs. Collapse of Hyperborea. One of the most popular theories for the collapse of Hyperborea was a physical inclination of the Earth's axis. Man's transgression of divine law caused a shift in the metaphysical balance, the effect of which was catastrophic on the Earth plane. Julius Evolva, the noted Italian metaphysician, explained that at this point the first cycle of history closed, and that of the second, the Atlantean, began. The memory of this Arctic seat is the patrimony of the traditions of many people, in the form of either of real geographic illusions or of symbols of its function and original significance, often transferred to a super-historical significance or else applied to other centers that may be considered as copies of the original one. Above all, one will notice the interplay of the Arctic theme with the Atlantic theme. It is known that the astrophysical phenomenon of the inclination of the Earth's axis causes a change of climate from an epoch to another. Moreover, as tradition tells, this inclination took place at a given moment, and in fact through the alignment of physical and metaphysical fact, as if a disorder in nature were reflecting a certain situation of a spiritual order. At any rate, it was only at a certain moment that ice and eternal night descends on the polar region. Then, with the enforced emigration from the sea, the first cycle closed and the second opened, initiating the second great era, the Atlantean cycle, the memory of a golden age. Although rendered in an archetypal or mythological form, serves a super-historical purpose. This is why the remembrance of the ancient civilization of Atlantis is sometimes enmeshed with that of Hyperborea. We cannot expect to prove the physical existence of these civilizations. All myths are known to have a historical basis, transmitted primarily by oral tradition. They are wrapped in a catchy and simple tale that ensures their survival and transmittal down through the ages. Myth serves as an extremely vital function, a recollection of our beginnings, a knowledge of where we are heading and what we are supposed to do. It is only now in the Kali Yuga that we have discontinued from tradition, losing the ability to correctly interpret and understand myths with historical kernels of truth. Hyperborea revived. The legend of Hyperborea revived during the 18th and 19th centuries when a flurry of books were published dealing with the idea that civilizations had first appeared not in the Middle East but somewhere else. The popular theory of the day postulated that the so-called Aryans were superior and more intelligent than Semites. Therefore, logically, civilization could not have originated in the Middle East, and Hebrew was probably not the first language. The Frenchmen of the Enlightenment were in no doubt that an Eden was situated on higher ground. The Germans, similarly, who were looking for their Aufklärung, also sought to be free of a history tied to the Mediterranean and Middle East regions. British and German scholars studied ancient Indian civilization and learnt the Sanskrit language. Many believe Sanskrit the original language of the Aryans. With new sources of knowledge from the ancient Egypt, Chaldea, China and India, researchers were treading dangerous ground as far as questioning man's origins. Biblical history was still strictly upheld, and moving too far from this historical boundary could have you silenced. Writers such as John Sylvian Bailey, the Rev. Dr. William Warren, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, and H. S. Spencer developed out theories, often borrowing from earlier sources, attempting to prove man's origins in the polar region. Tilak's book Arctic Home begins by stating that the well-known fact that warm weather remains in the Arctic regions, which shows that the climate was far different during the interglacial period. According to Tilak, scientists to concede the existence in the past of a warm circumpolar continent, and the circumstances there would not have been nearly unfavorable as imagined. Tilak was convinced that ancient Indian Vedic texts point unmistakably to a realm of the gods, where the sun rises and sets once a year, showing that their writers could understand the astronomical conditions at the North Pole. Tilak, who had perfect mastery of Vedic language, placed the original Arctic home existing around circa 10,000 BC, just prior to its destruction and the beginning of the last ice age. His book had little impact in the West but was popular in India. When the learned Zoroastrian H. S. Spencer wrote his book, The Aryan Ecliptic Cycle, a development of Tilak's work, he was able to obtain endorsements from Sir S. Radhakrishna, then President of India, as well as from dignitaries of the Theosophical Society in Adyar and the Sri Aurobindo Ashram in Pondicherry. Spencer's approach commenced not with the Vedic but the Zoroastrian scriptures, going further than Tilak in tracing the progress of the Aryans from the north to their new homes. and the schisms that beset them on the way. Spencer's Aryans made their presence felt after they traveled far and wide. They molded the religions and cultures of Egypt, Sumeria, Babylon, and of the Semites, hitherto worshippers of feminine lunar deities. However, the search for a terrestrial Hyperborea by many researchers and the movement of an original race has been extremely difficult and presumptuous. Proving human habitation possible at the North Pole somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000 BC is no mean feat, particularly if you were living in the 18th century. The numerous theories posted, offering contradictory or tendentious evidence, has served only to discredit the whole notion of Hyperborea. The same could be said of theories attempting to prove the existence of the lost continent of Atlantis. The drive to prove the actuality of a terrestrial Hyperborea has overshadowed its occult and symbolic importance. The spiritual pole. In the quest to discover the physical location of Hyperborea, most writers overlook the possibility that the mythology served a special symbolic and spiritual purpose. What if the truth behind the legend was esoteric and not exoteric, and some even today still maintain? Many traditions speak of a supreme spiritual center of supreme country, the supreme country that does not necessarily lay at a specific earthly point but exist in a primordial state, unaffected by terrestrial cataclysms. The supreme country, commonly regarded as the polar in orientation, symbolically is always represented as being at the axis of the world, and in most cases is referred to as sacred mountains. René Guénon, in his book The Lord of the World, says, almost every tradition has its name for its mountains, such as the Hindu Meru, the Persian Alborz, and the Mostelwald of Western Grail legend. There is also the Arab mountain Kaf and the Greek Olympus, which has in many ways the same significance. This consists of a region that, like the terrestrial paradise, has become inaccessible to ordinary humanity and is beyond the reach of those cataclysms which upset the human world at the end of certain cyclic periods. This region is the authentic supreme country which, according to certain Vedic and Avestan texts, was originally cited towards the North Pole, even in the literal sense of the word, although it may change its localization according to the different phases of human history. It still remains polar in a symbolic sense because essentially it represents the fixed axis around which everything revolves. The Vedic texts say the supreme country is known as Paradesha, also known as the heart of the world. It is the word from which the Chaldeans formed paradise and Westerners paradise. There is notably another name for it, probably even older than Paradesha. This name is Tula, called by the Greeks Tul, common to regions from Russia to Central America. Tula represented the primordial state from which spiritual power emanated. It is known that the Mexican Tula owes its origin to the Toltecs who came, it is said, from Aztlan and the land in the middle of the waters, which is evidently Atlantis. They brought the name Tula from their country of origin and gave it to the center, which consequently must have replaced to a certain extent that of the first lost continent. On the other hand, the Atlantean Tula must be distinguished from the Hyperborean Tula, which latter represents the first and supreme centers. In this case, Tula, representing a center of spiritual authority, does not remain fixed in a geographical location. Guénon states that the Atlantean cycle successor to the Hyperborean cycle is associated with Tula. The Atlantean Tula is an image of the original primordial state situated in a northern or polar location. As world cycles progressed onward, the supreme seat of spiritual power regresses further and further into hiding and obscurity. This, of course, is deliberate and predictable as humanity descends into the end of the age, progressively enmeshing itself into the material plane until the reversal of the establishment world order is imposed. It should be emphasized here that Tula, or the center of the spiritual authority, constitutes the fixed point known symbolically to all traditions as the pole or axis around which the world rotates. Metaphorically speaking, the world rotates around this seat of power even if it's not geographically north or south. In the Buddhist tradition, Chakravarti literally means he who makes the wheel turn, which is to say the one who, being at the center of all things, directs all movement without himself participating, or who is, to use Aristotle's words, the unmoving mover. The turning of the world, the pole and axis combine to depict a wheel in the Celtic, Chaldean and Hindu traditions. Such is the true significance of the swastika, seen worldwide from the far east to the far west, which is intrinsically the sign of the pole. The pole and mystical enlightenment. It is in medieval Iran that we find extant literature on the spiritual pole and the experience of mystical ascent to it. The Iranian Sufis, drawing not only on Islam but on the Mazdian, Manichaean, Hermetic, Gnostic, and Platonic traditions, blended a sacred knowledge said to be scientific, mystical, and philosophically practical. Esoterical, the Persian theosophers situated their Orient neither to the east nor to the south, whither they faced in prayer towards the Kaaba. The Orient sought by the mystic, the Orient that cannot be located on our maps, is in the direction of north beyond the north. About this pole reigns a perpetual darkness, says the recital of Hay in Ibn Yaqzan, one of the visionary recitals of Avicenna. Each year the rising sun shines upon it at a fixed time. He who confronts that darkness and does not hesitate to plunge it into for fear of difficulties will come to a vast space, boundless and filled with light. This darkness, says Corbin, is the ignorance of the natural man. To pass through it is a terrifying and painful experience, for it ruins and destroys all the patencies and norms on which the natural man lived and depends, but it must be faced consciously before one can acquire the saving gnosis of the light beyond. The darkness around the pole, annually pierced by the sun's rays, it at once terrestrial and symbolic. On the one hand, this is the situation at the North Pole, where there are 6 months of night and 6 of day. It is characteristic of esoteric tradition that the same image is valid on 2 or more levels, but as Corbin and Gwenon never tired of pointing out, the symbolic level is not a fanciful construct on the basis of hard terrestrial fact. It is quite the other way around. In the present case, the mystical experience of penetrating the darkness at the pole is the fundamental reality and the authentic experience of the individual. The fact that the setup of a material world reflects the celestial geography is what is contingent in brief in this teaching, as in Platonism, is the supersensible realm that is real and the material realm that is a shadow of it. The seeker, through deep meditation on spiritual matters, succeeds in entering a world of mystical experiences and makes a pilgrimage to Hyperborea that cannot be discovered from maps. Aristeas, the Greek poet, in shamanic rapture, is said to have traveled to Hyperborea while possessed by Apollo. Mystical soul travel to Hyperborea is common in ancient Greek literature. The journey to this pole is sometimes illustrated as the ascent of column of light extended from the depths of hell to the lucid paradise in the cosmic north. As previously mentioned, the pole is also a mountain called Mount Kaf in Islamic traditions, whose ascent, like Dante's climbing of the mountain of purgatory, represents the pilgrim's progress through spiritual states. Gwenon, in The Lord of the World, explains the idea evoking the representation under discussion is essentially one of stability, that in itself a characteristic of the pole. The mountain, referred to as an island, remains immovable amidst the ceaseless agitation of the waves, a disturbance that reflects that of the external world. According to it, is necessary to cross the sea of passions in order to reach the Mount of Salvation, the sanctuary of peace. Our search for Hyperborea is our desire to return to Pradesha or paradise, the primordial spring of man's original existence. The importance of knowing the terrestrial location of a lost civilization at the northern regions is thus overshadowed by its symbolic relevance. To seek Hyperborea is to quest for spiritual enlightenment. The mountain, the island, the immovable rock fixed in a polar orientation relays a symbolic representation of our search for ultimate reality. Its immovability anchors us to this important task.